Hi everyone and welcome once more to Get Indie Gaming. Well, we've made it to the point in the calendar where it's high time for our Game of the Year episode, where we count down the top 10 indie games of 2017. With dozens of titles vying for a place, it's worth a quick overview of the 5-part criteria we've used in putting this all together. First up, the most important. How much fun were the games to play? Then we took into account aspects of the innovation and how they might influence the wider developer community. This in turn had us thinking which of these games we would still be talking about in 3 to 5 years. The last criteria was to exclude games within early access. Only titles with a full retail or digital release were considered. So with that sorted, let's stick with tradition and present a handful of honourable mentions that didn't quite make this year's top 10. Out in early access and coming to the Xbox in December, this last-person standing FPS took the indie market by storm, following its soft launch back in March. A wonderful game for fans of the genre, and yet being in early access prevented PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds making this year's top 10. With a clever modern twist on the Where's Wally concept, Hidden Folks is a hand-drawn interactive miniature searching game. It's bags of fun and great to play in a group with friends or family. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice centres around a Celtic warrior who has experienced great trauma and has to do battle not only with fierce creatures, but with her own psychosis, a condition that alters her perception of reality. The game's clever use of binaural audio makes playing this one with noise-cancelling headphones quite a spine-tingling experience. And with the last of the 2017 honourable mentions, Last Day of June sees you join Carl on a deep interactive adventure about love and loss. Beautifully depicted with a charming score, Last Day of June offers players a truly poignant and profound cinematic experience. So, with the 2017 honourable mentions duly covered, let's jump straight into this year's top 10. As always, if you've any thoughts or you think we've missed anything, please let us know in the comments section below. At number 10 we have Cuphead, the long-awaited side-scrolling shoot-'em-up that finally landed the back end of September. In it, you'll pit yourself against any number of beasties ranging from angry carrots, thumpy frogs, rather upset birds and lots more. With all the artwork being hand-sketched, inked and painted to be a lookalike of the 1930s Max Fleischer cartoons, the artistry alone is staggering achievement which guaranteed its place in this year's list. Gameplay-wise, there's no doubting Cuphead's difficulty, which may put some people off, although once completed, the sense of achievement is certainly palpable. Out on the PC in January, Detention is the most impressive and atmospheric point-and-click adventurer of the year. Set within a fictionalized 1960s Taiwan, the hand-drawn visuals and washed-out colour palette is perhaps intentionally reminiscent of the original Silent Hill series, a theme that continues throughout the gaming experience. With a backstory steeped in Taiwanese mythology and history, Detention is set in a high school amongst remote mountains, where 2 students find themselves the target of supernatural beings. Let's be clear, Detention at times is seriously creepy. Its horror is both psychological and physical, where you interact with characters from Taoist, Buddhist and Chinese mythology. In keeping with normal point-and-clicks, there's no combat per se, although there's plenty of enjoyable and at times difficult puzzles to contend with. With each solution you gain more insight into the character's past and the events they've been exposed to. The dialogue is well written and the story gripping throughout. The hand-drawn art style we already alluded to is perfect for the game's eerie setting, which again wonderfully offsets and complements the musical score. This isn't your average horror title, and while fiction, its story is set and based upon around actual real-life events within a totalitarian regime that could happen in any country to any individual. This forces the player to think how they may act in similar situations. Detention is dark and yet enjoyable experience that fans of subtle, suggestive horror games should certainly add to their wishlist. Coming in at number 8 in another of this year's visual triumphs, Holo Knight is a Dark Souls-inspired Metroidvania that came to market on the PC in February and more recently out on the Switch. The animation and art style on display here is simply exquisite. Like all games of this particular genre, you begin with limited equipment, weapons, or abilities which must be earned as you progress within the game. Holo Knight is far from an easy game, and yet the difficulty doesn't detract from the sum of the experience. Platforming works well for the most part with nicely designed and eloquently placed sections. Combat is fast, fluid and enjoyable, enhanced by the quality of the sound and the graphics. We particularly enjoyed the boss battles that are challenging and varied, each needing the player to develop a new strategy to see them away. Okay, this isn't highly innovative, which you may recall was a key scoring metric for this year's countdown. However, in mitigation, its beautiful design, wonderful story, first-class animations mean Holo Knight has a well-deserved place at this year's number 8.
From the creators of Bastion and Transistor.
You tare, frati.
Meet your fellow exiles.
Although Paya didn't make it into our top 5 for July, repeated replays and other critical acclaim helped elevate this title into this year's number 7 position. With Paya, we've essentially a heady mix of basketball, fantasy RPG with all the usual elements of a visual novel. And while sounding somewhat odd, the end result is rather splendid. In terms of innovation and influence, well, we can't recall anything quite like it. You play as a faceless character looking to win your freedom by performing and presiding over a series of rites, best described as a competition between 2 teams of 3. Your aim is to grab a flaming ball and throw it into the opponent's flame in their half of the play area. We found the controls easy to master, and the gaming motion is easy and fluid. We particularly enjoyed the skill tree sections and the ranking up process where you unlock each skills as you progress. While also a visual treat, the real winner here is Paya's narrative, with its engaging cast of characters and a playful story that unveils in between the gameplay sections. If there's one criticism, well, we would like to have been able to explore Paya's world a little bit more, although this is a minor whinge in the scale of things. If you're looking for something quite different and truly magical, Paya is something that is well worth checking out. In the number 6 position for 2017, Sexy Brutale at its core is a puzzler which gave us one of the finest musical scores of any indie game of the year. Set within a sprawling mansion, you find yourself at a masquerade ball where the guests are being killed off one by the mansion's staff. You play as an aging priest, and it's your job to foil the various murder plots by manipulating time to aid your progress. Patience is key here. To solve the puzzles and prevent the murders, you need to observe the characters by hiding in wardrobe or spying through keyholes, which will help you figure out how to stop the killings. The initial puzzles offer an easy introduction to the game, with things ranking up in difficulty in what seems a linear level. The time travel element, key to the game's premise, is a marvellous touch. The day rolling back to 12 PM each time something goes awry. Thankfully, what you've learned during the course of the day, passwords, hidden tunnels as such, stay with you, so you're better prepared to stave off the murders before they happen. At times, particularly towards the end, the game has a few jitters with the narrative, although comparing it to the other major puzzlers of the year, the Sexy Brutale's artistry, score and gameplay makes it stand well ahead of the crowd. From the team at Infinite Fall, Night in the Woods arose from a successfully funded Kickstarter and found its way onto the PC and PlayStation 4 towards the middle of February. You play as May within a 2D narrative-driven side-scrolling mystery platformer. The game focuses on May as she attempts to reintegrate into her Rust Belt home, having dropped out of college. Aside from the animation and stunning soundtrack, again a feature here within this countdown, the real winner for us is the overall strength of the dialogue and underlying storyline. While at times the game's progression can seem on the slow side, the in-game events, characters, well, they're all sublimely and cleverly pieced together. Likewise, the platforming is usually fun, as are the mini-games, which feel well placed and enjoyable. However, On a cautionary note, ultimately the themes covered within Night in the Woods do not make for a feel-good experience, but of course, that's all very much the point. The overarching message of the game seeks to deliver on the difficulties of transforming into early adulthood, combined with hometown stagnation and the decline of upward social mobility. While undoubtedly heavy subjects, the way in which Night in the Woods is so well written means it should sit alongside the likes of Gone Home, Oxenfree, and Edith Finch as a classic of its kind. Getting ever closer to the top, we have Steamworld Dig 2, a successor to the 2013 Steamworld Dig. This year's number 4 popped out onto the PC, PlayStation 4 and the Switch this past late September. If we're going to summarise this title, well, we'd have to say this one's quite possibly a perfect example of a mashup between Spelunky, Boulder Dash and a good old Metroidvania. The plotline of the sequel sees you play as Dorothy, and her attempts to find the protagonist of the first game whose fate will be well known to those who made it through to the end of the original. For reasons that change as you progress, you'll spend much of your game digging mines and looking for ways to a given destination. Key to the success here is the upgrading your pickaxe and light-giving lantern. While there are enemies to fight and boss battles to encounter, combat feels secondary, to us at least, to exploration and discovery. The hand-drawn maps of the sequel feel infinitely better than the random placement of objects in the original. Visually, there's also a marked improvement, not just in terms of character design, but also the backdrops and in other game items. All in all, we found this to be a hugely entertaining and rewarding mix-up of varying ideas and influences. We very much enjoyed the 10 or so hours we spent in Dorothy's company, and are happy that this found its way onto number 4 in this year's Best of the Best compilation. So here we have the first rung of our Game of the Year podium. In third place for this year, and launched on the PC and iOS in August, West of Loathing is a simplistic looking 2D point-and-click action-adventure RPG. It's easy to be put off by the childlike character design and monochrome palette, but please, don't be fooled. It's wonderfully funny and has in our minds the best comedic writing of any game this year. It's essentially an open world with main missions to complete and a host of side quests that see you visiting areas across the map. In terms of gameplay, West of Loathing does everything you'd expect, although with subtle notes of an RPG parody. It manages to do this rather well without going into scorn or mockery. This may be an odd option to place so highly within the Game of the Year showcase, although in true honesty, it really isn't. It's really that good. Delightful from the onset and well worth your time and investment. This year's runners-up, Next Mashina, landed with us towards the end of June, and from day one, this game positioned itself as a firm contender for the title of the year. The setup is pure Robotron combined with Smash TV, and while on paper this sounds somewhat old-fashioned, the end result is a masterpiece of the genre, particularly for those of us from a certain generation who grew up on these arcade-style games. Of course, those new to this type of game shouldn't be put off, and while this twin-stick shooter is eye-wateringly fast and can at times be a real beast in terms of its difficulty, the ultimate reward is hugely enjoyable and a gratifying gaming experience. There's almost no let-up in the action at any point in the game. Enemies come at you in huge waves while you're also tasked in rescuing a number of humans before they're harvested away. After repeated playthroughs, and let's face it, you're going to die an awful lot in this game, you'll get to learn the level's intricacies and the patterns in enemies' behaviour which you can use to your advantage. Next Mashina is the textbook for this type of game, and it's one we're sure to come back to time and time again. Well worth its place at number 2 in this year's countdown. So perhaps not a big surprise to many, our Game of the Year for 2017 is What Remains of Edith Finch. Released towards the end of April, the team at Giant Sparrow delivered a tour de force A masterpiece of storytelling that, even within the inherent melancholy nature of the subject, manages to rise above the gloom. With Edith Finch, we have an interactive journey through the lives of a family who all seem to fall foul of tragedy after tragedy. You play as Edith as you make your way through the maze-like corridors of her colossal Finch family home, searching for stories as she explores her family history and tries to figure out why she's the last one of her family left alive. Memories of the past reside throughout the house, and with each memory she experiences the life of a family member on the day of their death, with stories ranging from distant past to present day. While the finale is known from the outset, when it comes, and taken the overall experience, the ongoing message here is one that's uplifting and affirming as it is eventually tragic. Looks and sounds wise, it's gorgeous throughout, on every level, with the visuals, audio and gameplay mechanics ensuring Edith Finch is one of the finest options out there for anyone looking for total environmental immersion. The cleverness and uniqueness in the gameplay, together with the strength of the underlying stories and how they all blend together with the game's artistry, made this our clear standout game of 2017, and it's almost certain to be the yardstick by which others of this type shall be measured. And so, with Edith Finch taking our Indie Game of the Year for 2017, we're almost at the end of today's video. We'll be back again soon, and rest assured we're putting together our top 40 or perhaps 50 best looking indie games for 2018. On the basis of what we're seeing so far, next year looks likely to build upon the success of 2017 and deliver much more besides. Again, thanks for watching, and please come back soon for more videos.